Hello and welcome to another edition of the Talking Basketball Podcast. I am Mark. And for those of you who are fresh, welcome. For those who are returning, well, glad to have you back. So if you may or may not know, my co-host Paul is currently sunning himself in Orlando, Florida, enjoying the sights and sounds of not only the magic, but everything that Mickey and his friends has to offer. So I'll be running solo today, and I can only apologise for being a few days late, but frankly, I have been ill. Lovely, lovely man flu. Doesn't get better than that. So hence the gravelly sniffliness, but we're going to plough through because we never miss an episode. So thanks for joining us on this one. Well, let's just get straight into it with the Super League basketball. It's been really, really good in the UK this week. We've started the championship finally. So for those of you who don't know, the Super League basketball took over from the BBL. It's the preeminent league in the UK. And up until now, it's been running a trophy, which is like a cup competition, and all of the teams play each other 4 or 5 times respectively, depending on how many are in each of the groups. That has now concluded, so they have now a semi-finals, and they're going to be going through to those stages, which is going to be played out in December the 6th and 8th, I believe. So we have now started the regular league, or the championship, so to speak. So that kicked off this week. So let's get straight into that, because after some of the starts that we've had, there's been a little bit of change, obviously. Some people have moved different teams. The league itself has had some ups and downs. So the trophy was a really good way, I think, to shake out what has happened. And, some people were surprised at some of the performances, particularly from teams like London. They didn't make the playoffs for the trophy, for example. So a lot of people were quite surprised at that, whereas actually, if you look now through to their first games coming in the championship, they maybe have gone back to old habits. We don't know, but they've shown a little bit more depth in their team. So going in at the moment, the Lions, what's the word we could use? Rebounded, let's say, from their trophy disappointment. Charged to the championship, straight up the action. They hosted Sheffield Sharks last Friday. Dominant 92-68 victory. Dominant. Aaron Rye back in the frame of mind. He was a key figure, 14.7 rebounds and 7 assists. But again, just looking at those stats, there's a bigger picture to be played. And you can tell with Aaron, he's the same as he was with Cheshire Phoenix last year. He's going to be an engine for the team. So a lot of things are running through him. London controlled that whole game. Second quarter onwards, they did get an early look in from Sheffield. They got off to the better start, I think it's fair to say. Drake Jeffries, Prentice Nixon for Sheffield were doing really, really well. Prentice, of course, familiar name from last season, but London just took over. And from that second quarter onwards, Jaden Dallaire turned up in the second half, 24-point win in the end. I mean, it wasn't the only big game this week, but it was a hell of a way to start the week, that's for sure. Moving forward, we then had Newcastle Eagles, and they hosted Manchester Basketball. But what was interesting about this game is it confused people a little bit, and it's the only criticism I have this week of the SLB. This was actually a game from the trophy, so this was not a championship game. This was one of the games that was held over, whether it's for scheduling or whatever reason, they didn't get to play it. So consequently, you having this game, but it actually doesn't count to the championship. It only counts to the trophy. And also, I won't say it was irrelevant, but Newcastle had already qualified and Manchester were bottom in the trophies, and they hadn't qualified. So the result of the game was nondescript. But it would still have been an important game because both teams wanted to show that they're still dominant. I do, however, question the, I want to say, competitive spirit in this one. Manchester clinched at 89-77. Donovan Mitchell, absolute dominant performance, 22 points, 12 rebounds. But, you've got Jordan Spencer on Newcastle. He opening strong. Manchester, Isaiah Moore, and I've got to get it right, Mackay Ashton Langford. He pushed them out to a double-digit win. By half-time, it was, I want to say game over, really. Newcastle were closing the gap. They were competitive. They were being competitive, but I don't think they were putting their foot down at all. And they got it to, I think it was 1 or 2 points within the final quarter. But then Mitchell opened it back up again, a big surge right towards that last bit. So that 89-77, it could have been a very different score. I personally think Newcastle held it off. Now, obviously, they were playing. You've got like European games coming round. You've also got these games for something that it doesn't matter the outcome regardless. And then you've got the championship coming this week. My gut is they didn't put their foot down. So we'll see. I'll have to ask a few people up in Newcastle what they think of that opinion. But Manchester, great balling. It's taking nothing away from their performance. I just think if you have a look at the depth of the two teams, Newcastle have a deeper team. But we're on Manchester. They had another game actually later in the week. We'll skip to that one. So they faced off against London Lions, and that was a proper back and forward game. So if you're going to watch one of the games this week, I definitely recommend go and watch that one, because it was one where at first I thought London will take this one, just because of the momentum that they just suddenly picked up from their first game. But then Manchester came back and you think, oh, hang on a minute, this is we've actually got a game on our hands now. For those of you who watched the BBL last season, you just seen London take the lead or take a forward position, and then that's it. It was game over. So it was really nice that you had this edging back and forward the whole way through. London edged them out 99-93. Yeah, 99-93. I can't even read my own writing. But I'm going to say key players for Manchester as a team, whereas for London, 36 point from Michael Brisker. That's going to make I've actually got a note here saying that it was 9 3-pointers that he hit. If that isn't contributing to your win, I don't know what is. So you could argue as a team, Manchester probably had a stronger outing in that thing. But it is nice to see the competitive nature of the basketball coming back, and that's the real win of this. That means London pull away. And I've got another note. I'm all over the place. I'm so sorry. Free throws. There were free throws late in regulation time. It did go to overtime. So, spoiler alert, it went to overtime. But London pulled away and grabbed the win in that one. But I will say, at this moment, I think it was really, really, really good game to watch. So, if you haven't watched it yet, they're all on DAZN, or DAZN, rather. Go check them out. You've got some the short form factors. I think they're like 10-minute games now, so you can actually watch them in a really, really contracted manner. Go watch it if you don't want to sit down and watch the whole thing. Personally, I'd watch the whole game, but that was a good one. I really enjoyed it. You can't go anywhere without Leicester Riders, really, I think, this week. They went to Surrey, 82-66 victory, and that means they've got a completely unbeaten record to date. Zach Jackson, 20 points, 4 rebounds and 6 assists. And Connor Washington, got to give him a shout out for Connor, 304th appearance as a Leicester Rider. So that's a record breaking for the team itself. 304 appearances. That's Leicester through and through, isn't it? You can't say fairer than that. But he had a really, really good performance coming off. Got a few shots off. Just Leicester in general, they just couldn't. I won't say couldn't put a foot wrong, but offensively, at least, they couldn't put a foot wrong, I don't think. So there was nothing really Surrey could come at them with, I think it's fair to say. And it's not for the want of trying. Leicester just have a ridiculous, very cohesive team, should I say. They really, really come together well. So Leicester, unbeaten, sitting pretty, whilst at the same time over in Scotland, the Newcastle Eagles redeemed themselves after their loss against Manchester. So they took an absolute commanding, I'd say a brutal victory over Caledonia in Glasgow, and 94-71. I don't think Caledonia would have been too pleased with that, if I'm truth, but Seneca Knight MVP, 17 points, 10 rebounds, and that was a pretty special game. The thing I'll take from that was the physicality. More than anything else on that game, you got two, big teams, but physically big teams, as opposed to some of the others. There's, I might say, run and gun. I look at Caledonia in particular as a physically imposing team, and that was quite a surprise to me to see how they've taken that. But you know, you can't really expect anything from each of these games, and that's the best thing that I could say has come out of the Super League starting this year. We saw it in the trophy games the last few weeks. We're now seeing it at the start of this week. Not anything's possible, it's the wrong way to put it, but you don't exactly know how each game's going to play out. So you've got the scores, we've given you the info, but I really cannot stress it enough. Go and watch it. Go and check it out. Go and see what the actual games are all about, because honestly, it feels. I was having a discussion with someone offline recently, and what they were saying was how there's a difference in the, not just the talent level, but the style of game and the caliber of player. And because of those, the way it is with the SLB now, the games are a lot tighter because you've got more of the mid-range player in there, shall we say. And it's not a disrespect to any players. What I'm really focusing on is, let's be frank, London Lions stacked team last year. There wasn't a lot of people could do about that, and all of that talent was obviously physically bought in. So when the money went, the people went. So if you look at it now, there's a lot of talented players and we're getting to see some homegrown talent, which is obviously a very important thing, and great for UK and GB basketball. We're getting to see some homegrown talent. But what we are noticing is that the games are way closer this year, and you can't count who it's going to be. So if we look at just like these, I won't say men's standings now for the league at the moment, it's the only other gripe I've got, which I'll come to. We've got Surrey 89ers. They've only played one game and they lost that one. Same with Manchester, same with Caledonia, same with Bristol. So they're the bottom 4 team. Cheshire haven't played a game yet. Didn't play this week. Sheffield Sharks, so they just sit sort of 5th in the table because they haven't played anything, but they haven't lost anything or won anything. Sheffield have played 1. They played 2. They won 1 and lost 1. So they're then 4th. Newcastle won 1. Leicester won 1. And London Lions have got 2 wins. Now, the only criticism I have, and I think it's a fair one, is because of the mess up that they made with the Newcastle or Manchester, I guess, playing that extra game. There's got to be a knock-on effect somewhere, because Sheffield got to play 2 games this week, and so did London. But why didn't Cheshire play at least 1 game? That's the bit that confuses me. It doesn't matter if it's London or Sheffield, but one of them shouldn't have played twice. Cheshire should have played a game against at least one of them. So that's the bit that confuses me a little bit. And I know, obviously, I can't even imagine how scheduling must be. And we have to remember as well, this season was a very protracted time frame to get anything together. So all credit to the teams in the background trying to rush schedules and get everything in place. But it just seems a bit trite, because what happens is now we come to the end of this week and you look at the standings of a table, and I had quite a few messages from people saying, what's the point in a table? And what's wrong with the table? And it's not correct. And it was purely because you got London Lions sat at the top because they've played 2 games and won 2. So they're naturally at the top. It's not necessarily a reflection of the talent or their wins. It's just not purely a numbers thing. Whereas Cheshire just sat there with 0. And you think that is not indicative necessarily of, it's only week 1. We've got lots and lots of weeks to go through. But still, I can understand why people were a little bit disappointed in that as well. So anyway, I'm sure with the week ahead, we've got a lot more interesting games coming up, and that's going to at least play out in favour of, I won't say balancing the league. Is that probably the right way to say it? I'm not sure. So this weekend coming up, we have Bristol Flyers and Cheshire. Cheshire making their first appearance. Leicester and Sheffield Sharks. Surrey and Caledonia, London Lions and Newcastle, and Cheshire and Sheffield Sharks again. So Sheffield banging in another 2 games, and Cheshire are going to have 2 games this week, so that balances it back up. It'll be really interesting to see how any of these teams plays out. Having 9 teams, that's a bit of a challenge. So the league is back. That's the most important thing. And all of the results and any of the games that you ever watch now will be going into that main table. So the whole trophy thing has been parked until, say, December the 6th, December the 8th, I think it is, when the 2 semi-finals are going to get played. But just before I move on from the Super League, I just wanted to talk about the actual other part that was announced, which is the bit that I think I can speak for Paul here. I say we're quite excited about this. And the Super League Basketball have announced a cup. And what they did with the cup this year is they opened it up to some of the other divisional teams. And that's from the NBLR, National Division. So they actually drew the cup. And Hemel are getting to play Manchester. Falkirk are playing Leicester. St Mirren are playing London. Derby are playing Surrey. Reading are playing Sheffield. Nottingham are playing Cheshire. Essex are playing Bristol. And Newcastle are playing Caledonia. Now, what's really exciting about this is we're going to get to see the mixture of, I won't say different talent pools, but we're going to basically it's going to come down to who's hungrier. And I mean, Paul's called it already. Someone's going to upset someone. Now, it's a shame we don't quite have enough that everyone is playing someone from a different division, but pretty much it's pretty much there. The only exception is Newcastle Caledonia, in actual fact, which is, I would say, a shame, but they'll probably be quite disappointed in that. Just looking through some of the, I mean, like Derby Trailblazers versus Surrey, that's going to be tough. The same as Reading Rockets versus Sheffield. That is definitely going to, and the Nottingham Hoods versus Cheshire Phoenix. These are Essex Rebels, all of the Falkirk Fury, all of these teams will absolutely give the SLB teams a run for their money. This is not going to be a walk in the park. So the SLB Cup, the first round's going to be played December the 13th, 14th and 15th. And if we remember that we've just said the 6th, 7th and 8th, I think it is, or the 6th and the 8th of December are the week before. That's when the trophy's going to be played. You've got the championship going on, and then they're going to be like a gap. And then during that gap, they're going to fill in these bits, and then they'll go back to the championship. And then when you get to January, they're then going to have more of it going through. So I think one of the challenges that a lot of people are going to face this year is having reminders. And, you know, the SLB have done some really good, not just promo work, but very clear messages about what the games are. Some of the things they could tidy up, but, you know, no one's perfect, are they? I would just say it's going to be a lot to stay on top of, well, what's this game for and what's that game for? And what do they all mean? You know, if there's too many of these games and, well, this game doesn't actually count for the championship, this one actually counts for some trophy or anything, does it really matter? Are we going to get players, for example, like London, who didn't do anything in the trophy at all, had no rhythm, nothing. Now we've got Aaron Rye back. They're now top of the table in the championship. So do they, you know, is the trophy not of value to them? Or was that one that they just couldn't get the timing together right? So there's all these sort of things you've got to consider. You know, we've seen it at the NBA, the in-season cup, or in-season tournament, as they want to call it. But this is going to be interesting for them. So anyway, stay tuned for that. We'll obviously keep doing weekly updates of this. And I think it's going to be really interesting where that comes onto. But I have mentioned it, so I'm going to roll on to it. Let's talk about the NBA. So this week is week 2 of the NBA season kicking back off. As you know, Paul was there for the first week, and he saw Paolo at that game with, was it 37 points in the first quarter, 50 points overall, a new franchise, tied a franchise record with T-Mac, I believe it is. But he was there for that, and unfortunately, I believe the next game, Paolo's out injured now with a calf strain or an injury. So from going from one of his, career-defining games to an injury is not ideal. But I've seen quite a few injuries. I don't know if a lot of you are finding this, the NBA this season, there's a lot of people off injured. Let's just roll in straight away. We've got to talk about Embiid. Not only has he been off injured, he was due to go play the week beginning like the 15th of November or something. And he's now been suspended a few games because he pushed a reporter, because the reporter said some things. Now, I'm not a giant Embiid fan, to be honest. But I will say, if you understand the context of what he's talking about, the reporter's bringing up the Embiid's son and also his brother that passed on. And really, the reporter's clearly just trying to trigger him, which obviously he did. And there's a part of me that just thinks, like, Embiid's a big dude. Why are you trying to antagonize him? Like, what if he does snap? It's like, he's going to break you in two. He's a giant. Just, why would you poke that bear? I don't, just for a story. So, there's been, I think Russ has done it a few times over the years with media, and other media people have pointed stuff out that have been shot down by players. And I think the media have a responsibility for the sensationalism and just trying to get their report out there. But still, it is nice for Embiid because he gets to have another few games off. There was a report also out, if those of you don't know, that he was getting looked at because he said immediately, I'm not playing certain games, and I'm only playing every other game and all these sort of things, and getting rested and not playing preseason. So they actually had the NBA actually did perform, or are currently going through some, looks like a kind of audit to basically say, hang on, you've just signed this crazy big deal. Are you actually going to be doing this, or are you actually going to perform? You've signed up for this, and now they're resting you. Like, you can't do that. You can't. So I think there's lots of things flying out. So he's not making his life easy for himself, is he? But if he has got a real injury there, if he has got a real problem, then that is unfortunate. It's kind of the go back to the 2000s. It's the Grant Hill effect, isn't it? Where Grant Hill didn't want to be sat out. He didn't want to not play, but at the same time, he crippled the Orlando Magic by having that crazy massive contract with no get out or loophole. So that killed the team's progress, really, and they couldn't get anyone in to help T-Mac. Could they have gone further? Yes. They would have then got someone else to help him with Dwight. There's so many things they could have gone down that road, but that crippled them for a decade, basically. So that's the impact that we see on with these sort of teams, and that's the things that you've got. Everyone just looks at, someone's moaning because a player's not playing, but you've got to think bigger picture. Let's look at the Clippers now. Where are the Clippers at the moment in terms of the NBA standings? They are, I won't say doing badly, but they're not where you'd necessarily expect them to be. A £2 billion brand new arena. Got Kawhi Leonard, who may or may not play occasionally, James Harden. They've had all the opportunity in the world over the last 4 or 5 seasons. They're 4 for 4 at the moment, and they're sitting in like 11th in the Western Conference. Are they going to ever do anything? Probably not. Should Kawhi retire? Probably. Is he going to go back to the same player he was when he played? He played well at the Spurs. There's no question that. Did he play well at the Raptors? Yeah. But if he's got these ongoing injuries, what would you do as a GM? I'd be interested to hear. Go to ukbasketballpodcast@gmail.com or reach out on the socials at Talking Basketball. Have a think what you would do if you were a GM of these sort of players, where when they're on the floor, they are dominant. And there's no question of that. There's no question of Kawhi's skill. There's no question that Embiid's dominant when they're on the floor. But do you pay them that kind of money and essentially take a knee? Bad pun for Embiid, isn't it? But do you take the knee knowing, oh, well, we just have to accept he's only going to play 40 games in a season or something? And he's had an MVP now, so he never has to worry about playing the 60 to qualify again. It doesn't bother him. So, yeah, that, to me, I just thought I'd throw that out there to start with. It's a really weird situation that they've got at the moment with a player like that, because if you think with Philly, you've got Tyrese Maxey over there, You've also now got Mr. George. Could they be a contender? Well, they would be if Embiid was healthy. There's no question of that, but he's not. And is he going to be again? Nah, I don't think so. So, enough of that. Let's talk about the weird one. Cleveland Cavaliers. Perfect 8-0. Top of the East. I mean, did anyone else call that? They did all right in the playoffs. Donovan Mitchell's clearly quite happy where he is, being the main guy there. He's done well. The last game I saw recently with him, he seems pretty balanced, and they've got him, Evan Mobley, and Darius Garland. They look like a nice trio together. They work really well. So Cleveland Cavaliers, I mean, Cleveland's a bit boring, isn't it, as a team wise? I know, but you had LeBron before that. I don't know. It's just whoever is backing them must be really excited by this start. That's for sure. Because an 8-0 is not to be sneezed at. They a nice little metric I've seen online. They do something where they say pace in the stat tables, and it refers to where they think a team's going to be like towards an end of a season based on the pace of their current playing. And so the pace for them, it says 82-0, because it's like, well, they haven't lost anything. So at the moment, it looks like they're going to be doing this. Whereas other teams, if they've lost one or two, it's suddenly like, oh, they're on a 72 game. You think, no one's doing an 82-0. It's not happening. But they're not far behind. Sorry, they're not. They are not far ahead of Boston, the reigning champs. I'm not going to say world champs because they're not. But the current NBA champions, Boston Celtics, are 7-1. With that one going to, I would arguably say, the best game that I watched last week. Pacers versus Celtics. You know the outcome, obviously. I won't spoil it, but it was good. And since they've got Siakam, and he had some clutch plays, let's put it that way. They absolutely have just turned into this team that you think, oh, okay, Halliburton had his glory when he was in the in-season tournament, which is now the Emirates Cup, obviously. That's now gone to, just like we were talking with the Cavs, actually, like a balanced team. Siakam coming into that team has really, really allowed them to stretch their legs. So Indiana are looking like, okay, they could be something. I mean, where they're sitting at the moment in the table-wise, third, 4-4, yeah. Indiana has often been in and around the playoffs, top half of the table. That's usually where they sit. They haven't been a real front runner, shall we say, since the probably Reggie Miller days, or back 2004, maybe with, yeah, probably that was it. It was the Malice in the Palace. That was when the Pacers were probably at the last bit with Jermaine O'Neal and the guys there. But other than that, I mean, you're always thinking of the Pacers as a middle sort of team. And I'm really interested to see how this plays out, because you don't normally, the Celtics are a pretty good all-round team. But it's surprising seeing that they had a bogey team, should we say. So what I'll do is I've done it a different way. I'm going off on all tangents, so let me just go back to, I've written this out today. I've tried to keep my brain in gear, but it's not working. So let me do it with Eastern Conference. So we talked about the Cavs doing really, really well, and obviously the Celtics, and they are pushing ahead. I think they're going to still be up there and be a problem at the end of the season. They are the same team effectively. There's no reason why the recipe won't repeat. If you're talking about the New York teams, the Brooklyn Nets and New York Knicks, they're 4-4 and 3-3, and they don't really look like they're going to be up to much this season. Maybe I could be wrong, but last season with New York, you thought, oh, this is New York's going somewhere this year. Spike was practically having a heart attack on the court. I don't know. it's different. I think, they've lost DiVincenzo, they've lost Hartenstein, Julius Randle as well. So they've lost some key players. Josh Hart, he's gone as well, hasn't he? Of course. So I don't know. I think the Knicks they're going to be middle this season, just from what we're seeing at this moment. Then maybe they're looking to plan a move or do something big. But having Big Cat there at the moment, I'm not. I want to say not a giant fan. He's had some big games. So Karl-Anthony Towns, for those who don't know who Big Cat is, he's had some good games since he's been a Knick. He's been in the league a long time, remember. I think it's his 10th year now. So he's been around for a while. Did they need a big? Yes. But I don't know if that style of play is going to work the way that the system worked last time. They've broken up the Villeneuve guys. They've broken up that nice team flow that they had. And that was the thing that, for me was the takeaway last season. A lot of the teams that were really doing well for themselves, they had this like team gel that came together. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. And as for the Nets, I don't see anything happening there personally. Bulls and Heat and Pacers are really close behind with just a handful of wins, but they're just trying to get traction as they're sort of going through. But it's the Bucks and the 76ers that are struggling early. 1-6 for Milwaukee right now. I mean, it's not ideal, is it? That is really not ideal. You got Toronto on 2-7 and Detroit on 3-6, but Philly's 1-6 as well. You wouldn't have thought that, would you? Having Dame, having Giannis, Middleton, and obviously the Sixers, their rosters. We've already talked about that. Reggie Jackson, Maxey, Drummond, and Paul George, obviously Kelly Oubre Jr. And Mr. Embiid himself. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Why are all these teams that you think are going to be super teams? It's a bit like the Brooklyn Nets a few years back, if you remember, when they had everyone, it seemed, and they just couldn't make it work. It's funny, isn't it? Funny how that works. Anyway, I'm shooting off. So let's get back onto the East. Magic and the Hawks, they're 3-5. I'm not going to say they're showing potential. The Magic have been hit because of losing their momentum. After Paolo had that massive game, him then getting injured, I think they had a 4-game losing streak. That's hit them massively. Atlanta I think they've had some tough games. That's all I'll say, because they did play the Thunder. Although Wizards and Hornets, Raptors rounding that out, they're going to sort of not really do anything this season, if we're going to be honest. But I would say personally, the East is looking, I won't say set, but I think where everyone is at the moment is kind of where everyone's going to be seeing. It wouldn't surprise me if Milwaukee drastically changed. We're only 7 games in. You've got 82 games to go. We're not even a tenth of the way in the season. But it's very telling when you got teams with big stars and huge payrolls, and then 14th and 15th of the league. Whereas someone like Washington Wizards are above them, and that shouldn't be acceptable, really, should it? There's no excuse for that. But yeah, we're hoping big things from Orlando. I think they potentially could be in that upper top 6, automatic qualification for playoffs. They could get there, I think. And they could probably oust Atlanta and New York, because I don't think they're that far off them. But we'll see. As for the Brooklyn Nets, well, as I just mentioned, I don't think Brooklyn's up to much this year, but we'll see. So let's move on to Western Conference. This has been, obviously, it's the most important because Dallas play it. But this has been a real eye-opener, I think, because everyone was, I won't say expecting that Timberwolves were going to come out. They made a big impact last season. Anthony Edwards really stepped up all of a sudden. And it was, super explosive last year. But this year it's changed. Obviously, they've lost Karl-Anthony Towns. But in the background, obviously, well, not obviously, but Minnesota have got a lot of things where people are trying to purchase them. So that's having a huge impact for them. And I think personally, Minnesota might end up being mid this season. They're 4-3. They're still stronger than a lot of the teams in the East. Let's not pretend that they're not. And I would still say that the West is stronger than the East as it stands right now. But yeah, they are not the team they were last season. So there has been some ripples that you wouldn't necessarily expect. It could be that they're just trying to find their feet. 4-3 is hardly a bad start. It's still over 50%, which is what you really need for playoffs, to be honest. If you're on 0.5, you're okay on a win ratio. So let's see how that plays out. But I was surprised. I was actually I would have put money on them being further up than they were. Whereas, OKC are making a statement being 7-0, and they're the only other undefeated team in the league, which I think was pretty cool. But they did then have a loss very recently, and so did the Suns. So I literally had that in my notes, and then obviously they got a loss very recently, and that was disappointing. But so the Oklahoma City Thunder were 7-0 as I wrote my notes, but that evening they actually lost, so they're 7-1. But they were still making a point. They're joining up the top with Phoenix. I didn't expect Phoenix to be up there, but honestly, Durant is playing out of his skin. He is, is it a contract year for? I think it is, isn't it? Contract year for him. Yeah, that might make sense. Not that it's all about the money, but it does help. But Booker and Durant absolutely carrying Phoenix right now, and they had a comeback win actually over. I think it was the Clippers. They were down and they just clawed it out of nowhere. But I would say that the Warriors are showing depth. That's one that I've got as my little bullet point. Warriors with a little question mark, because I think there's something there. They lost Clay. It's a big blow for them. Clay seems very settled in Dallas. Why would he not be? But it looks like with Steph back, it looks like they, could be doing something. Steph had a little injury, and back forward, should we say, in terms of is he coming back on? Is he not? In being his ankle, I think it was fair that everyone, the press make a big deal of it, but Curry's known to have had lots of ankle injuries quite early in his career, and yeah, that's why I think everyone was a bit worried. Like, is it kind of you're getting at the end of your career, now you're having an injury, it's going to take you longer, and everything's on him as well. So I thought it was good seeing the Warriors do all right. You want to see competitive sports. That's what we all want to see fundamentally. Look, I'm not going to go through all the teams, but I will say, Lakers 4-4. That's LeBron's really stepped up, and he's playing like I can't remember who it was. Someone had called out someone online, and he said as soon as he's got his son on the bench, LeBron's going to turn up again. He's going to be like, yeah, I'm going to show you. This is how Daddy goes to work, sort of thing. And he is doing that to a degree. So if that is his strategy, it's definitely working. And obviously got to shout out my Dallas because they're doing superbly. Jazz and Pelicans, though, struggling down the bottom. Well, Jazz in particular, they're 1-6. Pelicans, Portland, Spurs, they're all kind of mulling around in like the 12th to 15th position, like 3-5, 3-6 kind of scenario. And for those who haven't seen, Pop has been off with a sort of medical condition, so he hasn't been coaching for the last couple of games. So hopefully, shout out to Pop, just a coach that everyone respects, no question there. And yeah, hopefully it's nothing serious and he makes a good recovery. But I've got to say, I think one of the standouts for me was I literally posted it on the socials. If you haven't seen it on the socials, you've got to go check it out. But Domantas Sabonis, often overlooked, probably one of Lithuania's greatest players. But I still think he needs more respect, especially with the stats. Since 1977, no one's managed what he did the other night. 6 for 6 field goals, 5 for 5 free throws, 17 points, 13 assists, 11 rebounds, 0 turnovers. So no turnovers and no missed shots, and he got a triple-double. Like, why is this not being said? This is unbelievable to have a stat like that. Like, not only is he putting up a good number, and they are good numbers, just in an assist or a rebound or a points, even if they were a double, not just a triple-double. But then the fact that he also didn't turn over. Oh, and the fact he didn't miss a single shot. Efficiency must be going off the chart. If you've got him in a fantasy league or whatever, his efficiencies must be going off the table. But yeah, so I think a massive shout out to him, and also to Clay at the Dallas Mavericks. You know, I was one of the first people who was a bit unsure about having him there, on the basis that wasn't sure how his play would fit in with Luka, and obviously Luka is the jewel in Dallas. It's fair to say. Even Kyrie will say it. They played well together. They adapted well together. How was Clay going to fit into that? They are using him. They are absolutely using him for what he's good at. And if you get bored and want to watch a game, just look at the spacing and how they're letting Clay do the thing that he wants to do. You get set up, you run to the spot, we'll get you the ball as you get to the spot so you can just take the shot. So he's the king of, I will take 2 dribbles and hit like 12 shots or something. That's his bag, isn't it? So, I mean, I don't know if that's with Jason Kidd. I don't know if it's just coaches, the players, if it's how they're gelling. It could be a combination of all of it, I suspect. But they are really, really, really going to come together. And personally, I mean, they're 5-3 at the moment, which, equal to Houston. But someone like Golden State 7-1. But as I say, we're only not even a tenth of the way through the season, so it will be very interesting to see where Dallas sit at the moment. They're 5th in the table. They could be in that top 5. Could stay in that top 5 towards the end of the season. But I really like. I mean, stand-up performances this week. I've got to give a shout to Tyrese Maxey as well. 45 points with their win over Indiana. That's fair play to him. And it's funny that, you look at Philadelphia and you don't expect that sort of performance when they're that far down. But he's stepping up where the others aren't. Paul George isn't doing his bit. Maxey is. It's really interesting. Obviously, we've got to talk about Paolo and that massive 50-point explosion. Shows the potential of the Magic, but yeah, we've got to see what happens with this injury, if he can come back from that. And the final one, everyone will have seen it. No, I'm not talking about Jay Morant's awesome 360 layup, which was cool. I'm not talking about his also off-shot pass, no look, that everyone was expecting him to go up for the massive dunk. I'm in fact talking about Michael Brisker, 36 points for the Nets. Massive for their win over the Bucks. Like, I'll be honest, Michael, no disrespect, didn't know who you were. I don't follow the Knicks, so I don't know all the players. But yeah, 36-point night. He's got to be happy with that. He'll be remembering that one for a while, and especially over the Bucks. Like, just what are they doing? But at the moment, it's looking like Cleveland and OKC are setting the scenes for your East and West, at least. Let's see how it plays out at the end of the season. But I have got no more basketball news, and you'll be thankful that I'm going to call it an end. So thank you so much for listening and bearing with me while I fumble my way through trying to speak and cough. And if there's any coughs that make it in the edit, I'm so sorry. I'm going to try and cut them all out if I can do. Hopefully Paul will be back next week if he doesn't come down in a plane crash or something horrific like that. Until then, I've been Mark. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.